Hi, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is Caxa again. It's an open source project of mine that allows you to compile Node.js applications into a single executable binary that helps you distribute your application more easily, especially if it is a web application or a command line application. It's not particularly suited for applications that are desktop applications. For those you probably want to use Electron. And I have been working on Caxa in the stream many weeks ago, and we shipped version 2.0 of Caxa, which introduced support for ARM processors. And to do that, we kind of changed the way that we were compiling the so-called stubs. We have to compile something that bootstraps the executable. And in this whole infrastructure, we added a lot of complexity. We changed how the stubs were compiled, we changed how they were distributed, and the whole time I was like, interesting, we are increasing the complexity, but it probably pays off. Let's see where this goes. And then we released version 2.0, and in version 2.0, we added support for ARM, and we changed the way the stubs were distributed. The stubs are these executable files that you have to have in order to build things with Caxa. Now, the problem is that all this complexity piled up and many issues arise. And it's interesting because the whole time I was like, this is not the simplest way of doing this. This is not the simplest thing that could work. But at the same time, people were like, oh yeah, you should do it this way. It's going to be awesome. And also, I wanted to try because it seemed like the more correct approach. But then problems started to creep up. So let's talk about the problems and what we are going to do about them, and some other features I would like to put into version 2.1 as well. So first, the way we are distributing the stub. The stub is this necessary part for using Caxa. If you want to build your applications using Caxa, you need this stub. It's this executable, and it doesn't really matter what it does right now. What matters is how it is distributed. To begin with, in version 1.0, the distribution method was just I checked the binary into the Git repository, so it was just there. And when I created an npm package, the stubs were just there. They were just shipped along with the npm package. Then for version 2.0, we developed this huge GitHub Actions routine that would compile everything on GitHub Actions and would put all the compiled files in a release. And then the release, then there would be this post install script that when you install with npm, you install Caxa. It goes to GitHub and fetches the correct version for your architecture. And all of this kind of worked until it didn't. So let's talk about the problems here. In version 1.0, everything was just shipped along with the Git repository, and therefore with the npm package as well. In version 2.0, we did it this way. And the problems were, first of all, in China, it is difficult to access GitHub releases like this. So people in China were having problems to use Caxa. They had to set up mirrors for GitHub, and then they would have to change the code in Caxa so that Caxa would be aware of these mirrors and so forth. So this user, I don't know how to pronounce this user's name, but this user reported the issue. Apparently the user is in China, and the person also suggested, I don't think I have it open here, but the person sent a pull request that changed the installation procedure to download from a mirror to detect if you are in China and if you need a mirror and so forth. So that's issue number one, the problem of not being able to access GitHub releases. Issue number two is something that I didn't even try by myself, but this person said that sometimes the post install script doesn't even run, especially if you're running with root, which I guess makes sense because a post install script has more or less complete control over your machine. It's not able to do some things like completely destroy the operating system because it's not running under root. But if you are running npm install with root, then the post install script can completely take over your machine. It's super insecure to run a post install script as root. So if you're running npm install as root, then you have to pass a special flag to npm to say, oh, I actually want to run the post install script. And I suppose that if you're running in a Docker container, then there is a fair chance, it's likely, it's not certain, but it's likely that you are going to run with root. So you would need to be aware of this issue and pass this special flag, and things don't just work. And it's just because of this stub that I'm shipping using GitHub Actions. And then finally, the third issue happened today, 6 hours ago. This helpful user said that the way we are downloading the stub from GitHub Actions, we have a JavaScript file. It's a very simple script that depends on this package to download something, to download the stub from GitHub, and this package has a vulnerability. And the person even sent a pull request that would fix this. And I suppose the fix is by changing the package to another one that doesn't seem to be vulnerable. But you see how all these things are piling up? And it's just because we decided to distribute the stub with a GitHub release. And why did we want to do that? Well, because there may be like, I don't know, 7 or 8 of these stubs, and each of these stubs is like 7 or it's like 2 or 3 megabytes worth in size. So we're talking about 20 or 30 megabytes. It's more like 3 megabytes for each, and I believe there are 2, 4, 7 of them. Yes, there are 7 of them, so we're talking about 21 megabytes. And we were trying to save that, not from people who use binaries compiled with caxa, but for people who are building with caxa. We would be saving the developers 20 megabytes worth of download. But for that, we had to introduce a lot of complexity already, and it's only getting worse. Now we have to use this other package for downloading. We need to be aware of vulnerabilities. We need to maintain this download script. We need this whole GitHub Actions infrastructure, which may break in the future. It's harder for people in China to get the stubs from here. So you know what we are going to do? We are going to simplify this project a whole lot. And it usually goes like this when I'm developing something. It usually starts very simple, and then it grows in complexity as people request more things. And then we find better ways of doing things, and it gets simpler again. So I guess it's a common story in software development. So how are we going to make this simpler? Well, we are going to distribute the binaries, the stubs, along with the npm package. That's what we're going to do. It's simpler. It is more correct, because the way you would check that you downloaded the thing correctly was to use this checksums file, but you would need to do that manually, or you would need to run some scripts that would check the checksums file, or I guess in our download script you kind of check the checksums file, but it's really getting complicated. How about we just ship these stubs with the npm package, and then developers will have to download 20 megabytes. You know, in JavaScript land, that is almost nothing. So we are going to ship this along with npm. But since we are doing this, I thought, wouldn't it be nice for us to simplify the GitHub Actions as well? The initial reasoning was this. I would like to be able to compile the stub. So the stub is written in Go. It's not written in JavaScript, and I have to compile it. So I would like to be able to compile the stubs natively in the architecture that they are meant for. So if I have something for macOS, I would run a Go compiler in macOS to compile the binary. And that's all fine. But the problem is that in GitHub Actions, there are not runners capable of all the architectures we want to support. In particular, right now, GitHub Actions does not support Darwin ARM, so Macs with the new M1 processors. And then for all the Linux ARM versions, we have to do a lot of handstanding, and we have to configure Docker and we have to set up Docker just to be able to compile this. And I guess it kind of makes sense in principle. It is the correct way of doing this because otherwise we would need to use cross compilation. So we would be like in Linux and we would be compiling for macOS. But more importantly, we would not be able to run the tests if we don't have access to the native architecture. So we would be compiling the stub for Linux ARM and we would never run it on Linux ARM to actually test it. The unfortunate situation here is that that is already happening. It's already happening for macOS ARM. So I thought, well, you know what if we just keep things simple and go back to using cross-compilation? And I'm all against cross-compilation in principle because you actually want to test things in the architecture that they were developed for. So you would want to have a Raspberry Pi to test this Linux ARM stubs, and you would like to have a Mac with an M1 processor, but it gets complicated and you cannot automate some of these things, and the things that you can automate are really hard to do. So in caxa 1.0, we were using cross-compilation, and the Go compiler is very good at cross-compiling stuff. It's not perfect, and we have to keep the stub simple. If we use something like a C extension in the stub, then cross-compilation gets really complicated. But most packages in Go are written in Go. They are not dependent on C extensions, and the stub will be kept simple as much as we can. And that may have some drawbacks. We may not be able to use the best compression algorithms, but sometimes simplicity is better than some of these other criteria. So I decided that we are going to go with the simplest thing that can work again. It was more or less already like that in version 1.0. So that is what we are going to do. We are going to ship the stubs with the npm package. We are going to cross-compile so that we don't have to set up a whole infrastructure on Github Actions for this. Though, as much as I like this, it will probably break in the future the same way that download, the package download. Download is the name of the package, so think of download in quotes. This package broke. There is a security vulnerability. And I believe that the ARM support for Linux using Docker will also maybe not have a vulnerability, but it will have something that will need maintenance. So we are already not running the tests in macOS for ARM. So how about we don't run the tests for Linux on ARM either? We are going to run on all major operating systems, Linux, macOS, and Windows, and we are going to run the tests for Intel 64, and we are going to run a cross-compiler to compile to all these platforms, and we are going to run as much of the tests as we can, but otherwise we'll just shift the stubs without having actually tested on the native machines, and that will be fine. If something comes up, it is probably a bug on the Go cross-compiler, and it will be fixed eventually because Go, is a very popular programming language. So we're going to rely on that. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. That is the motto of caxa 2.1. But there are other things I want to sneak into this release. So I want to sneak into this release this feature, which I am kind of reluctant about, but we introduced the notion of including only certain files in the build if you want to save on build size. So if you want your binary to be smaller, you can say which files to ignore. And this person is making the case that we should also have the opposite, which is an exclude option. And if include is an advanced option, then exclude is advanced, advanced, advanced asterisk. Because it's really easy for you to change your project structure, forget to put it on the include. I think I was saying this the other way around. So exclude is take out some of the files from the build, and include is only includes the files that I mentioned. So include is advanced, 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 asterisk. Don't use this. Please don't use this. I'm developing this, but I really don't want you to use it. That's probably how I'm going to document this. I really don't want you to use this. But if you have this feature, then you are able to say exactly which files to include in the build. I find this feature kind of annoying, and it has, again, the problem of giving you more options, making things more complicated. But implementation-wise, it will not be too hard, and it will not introduce dependencies like GitHub releases was a dependency and Docker was a dependency. So all these dependencies are not the case for these features. So I'm okay implementing this one. Finally, the last feature, so we are talking about three things: the distribution of the stubs, the include option on the command line, and a message on initial extraction, because it may take too long, especially on Windows. So we would like to be able to tell the user, please hang on, we are still working. And there is a pull request for this, so we will look at this pull request. We'll probably not be able to work on this entire thing. So probably we are not going to release 2.1 today, but the schedule is, we are going to work on this today. Tomorrow, I'm going to be a guest on IDDQD's channel, and we are going to talk about Reaper and how to release a package using Repack. So tomorrow, I'm not going to work on caxa, but then maybe on Wednesday, we'll get back to caxa. Initially, I was planning on just doing a little bit of work on caxa, and I would be back to Notestrator, the other project I'm working on in the streams. I was planning on doing that on Wednesday, doing Notestrator on Wednesday, but I decided to put more things into the 2.1 release for caxa, so we're probably going to take the rest of this week, so Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to get this out the door, but we'll see. So let's start with the distribution and the whole management situation, from compilation to distribution of the stubs. So to begin with, we have this stub that lives in the root of the project. I just got rid of that, and I will get rid of it here in the stub, in the git ignore as well. And the reason why I'm doing this is that we are no longer going to have just a single stub in the project. We are going to cross-compile, and we are going to have all the stubs for all the architectures. By the way, one thing that I don't think we will do is to just check in the stubs into the Git repository. I don't think we are going to do that, but we'll see. We may do that. To determine whether I want to do that or not, what I would like to do is say go build stub, and I will rename the stub to maybe stub2, and I will compile again. And now I'll check, are the stubs different? I think that I did this test in the past, and the stubs were different. And oh, they are not different. So you see, when you compile a Go program and you compile it again and you compile it again, you always get the same output, it seems. So if you only get the same output, here's an idea. I don't have to care about whether I checked this into the repository or not. Okay, so let me give you the full picture. The reasoning went like this. If I am compiling things on my machine and distributing the stubs, there is no way for you, the user, to verify that I did not ship something malicious with the binary. The only way for you to get that was to recompile from scratch. And then with the GitHub Actions, we would build in public. You could see the logs of the build output, and you would see the checksums of the binaries. And that way you could verify that if you trust Microsoft to run GitHub Actions correctly, you would trust our binaries. But since then I thought, well, are the binaries any different? They are not. So one way you can verify that the stub really was compiled correctly is to just recompile and compare the outputs. So with that, you don't have to trust me. You can look at the source and recompile and check the checksum. So maybe that's what we are going to do, which is literally the simplest thing that can work. It's so simple, and it's reversing most of the things we complicated in the 2.0 release. And I'm very in favor of that. So how about we go back to the initial project structure, which was to have a stubs directory, and our stub.go will go in there. That allows us to simplify this configuration on TypeScript, because now there is no longer a TypeScript file in the source directory. So now I can remove that line that was saying which files to compile, and that line was there so it would ignore the Go file. But I suppose that if I run npx tsc, it will run the node, it will run the TypeScript compiler just fine, no complaints. Okay, no. So that line was there so it would ignore TypeScript files in the examples folder. So that line, unfortunately, is still necessary. There you go. Okay, so that line is necessary. But there is another line here on Prettier when running the tests that excludes the Go file, but the Go file is no longer in the source folder. So now we can run npm test, which will run Prettier, and it will ignore the file. It will not need to ignore the Go file. Okay, so Prettier already passed, and I'm not going to run the whole test suite because that's kind of slow. But I definitely want this change. So I suppose that we are gonna go with the simplest thing that can work, which is to just put the stubs here in the Git repository. Makes everything so simple, and yes, the repository will explode in size if every time we do a little change to the Go file, we compile 21 megabytes worth of binaries. And if you want to clone this project, it will take forever and it will be huge, but I don't expect that we are gonna change the stub all that often. And if we do, then I can always rewrite the history of the project, get rid of all the historical cruft. So we are gonna go with the simplest thing that can work, which was how we started. So now we need to change this line, because when we are building the stub, we are not just building for our current platform, we are doing it for all platforms. So let's see what this line looks like, or better yet, let me switch gears. Let's get rid of the post install script. So there is only, by the way, here is the problem. This is the affected package in the security vulnerability, and this line is the line that introduces the problem for China users, for Chinese people, because this line is hard coding us to get stuff from GitHub releases. And you may be thinking, oh, but if I am now going to GitHub releases and I cannot do that from China, how come can I download an npm package? It happens that there is a Chinese mirror of npm, so Chinese users can install stuff from npm, but as far as I can tell, there is no equally easily accessible mirror for GitHub releases. So there is only one part of this whole script that I care about, which is the part where we check which processor, so which architecture your processor is and which operating system you are using. That part will be necessary regardless, because we will need to say what is the stub that you want to use when packaging. So here in the main script that actually packages your project, somewhere in here we are packaging the stub, and on this line we will have to do some extra work to find the right stub in the stubs directory. But that's the only part of this whole file that I care about. So I can just delete the post install script, and here in package.json I can delete this line as well. Let's commit what we have. Next, this line. So this line is going to recompile the stubs. And now we want to do that 7 times for all the 7 architectures that we support. And the Go cross compiler will be used. So let's do this in steps. I'll take this out of the scripts, out of this JSON here, and I'll put it here so that we can see better what's going on. So we are using this to remove this stub, and I think that now this will remove from the stubs folder a stub called, and why do we need this in the first place? So that we force the Go compiler to recompile something. By default, it will not do that. So how do I want to do this? Let me go to the releases and we'll check all these platforms. Oh, and there is another wrinkle here. That is another thing we may want to simplify. So let's look at this checksums file. So you see how when you build, and this is not using a cross compiler, this is just literally using Docker to emulate an architecture and then using the Go compiler to compile something. And you can see that when you compile in ARM6 and when you compile in ARM7, the output is the same. So I don't think it makes sense for us to distribute two separate stubs. Now, we are not going to look into your version of ARM. We are going to look at whether you're using ARM or ARM64 on Linux, but we are not going to look at what ARM version you're using because it doesn't seem to matter. And that will also simplify things a bunch. So we will not have 7 stubs. We will have 6 of them. And the ARM stub for Linux will be called this. It will not append the ARM version here at the end. None of that. Simpler. So we will end up with 6 stubs. So we're talking about 18 megabytes to keep in the GitHub repository and to download from NPM. It's completely fine for most developers. Okay, so I guess the way we're going to do this is we're going to have multiple lines just so I can make sense of things, and then we put everything into a single line because we will need to copy and paste this into here, and that needs to be a single line. So let's order this in the order that I care about. So I care about Windows the most because of market share. I mean, if you are doing a command line application, Windows is probably going to be the most used platform. Depending on the application, it may be different, but Windows is the biggest market share. So then later I care about Mac OS in this order, and then I care about Linux in this order. So we're going to start with that. And yeah, I think this is fine. And then we need to say cgo enabled 0. That is necessary for reasons so that Go does the right thing. And we want this line to read like this, and this is under the stubs folder, so it kind of looks like this. But we need to say what is the Go architecture and the Go platform. And I believe that someone in an old issue that is already closed, but for ARM support, someone mentioned the lines that need to run. So we can just copy from here. And I suppose there is even a better investigation of this in a pull request that has been closed. We closed this, we merged this live in our previous stream. So here it is. And these are the lines that we will want. Where is it? It's right here. So we probably want something very similar to this. So some things have changed. This is now caxa, 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 because we wanted to make things simpler and not have special characters. I guess the part that is important is the Go operating system. So here we will say cgo enable Go operating system Windows, and then go build that. And I believe it would make sense for us to be explicit, because if you are not explicit, then I suppose that this will run on the current architecture. And if you are on a Mac with an M1 processor, or if you are a Raspberry Pi or whatever, if we are not explicit, then this may compile for Windows ARM. And that's not what we want. We want something like this. So now I need to actually look at the options for Go Arch. Okay, so these are the operating systems, and these are the Go Arch. So I guess I don't want x64, I want AMD 64. And there is this difference between Windows and Win32 and AMD 64 and x64. The reason is here we are talking about Go, and here we are talking about Node.js, how Node.js identifies the architecture, the operating system, and so forth. And I want this to match the output from Node.js, the names used by Node.js, so everything just works from here on out. So here I'm talking to Go, but otherwise I'm just talking to Node.js. And then here this stub line we'll have to read like this. All right. So how about we just try this out? We can do this from the command line. Oh, so I have to prefix all these commands with npx for them to be able to run. And I need this because I want you to be able to run. So I need this and I need that because I want you to be able to go to Windows, not install the Windows subsystem for Linux, don't use bash or anything, just go to PowerShell, and I want you to be able to run this action. So SHX and CrossEnv are cross-platform implementations of things like remove and setting environment variables and so forth. I guess the issue is that I am in the source directory. And now it's kind of slow because it is running this, which is kind of slow. Cross-compiling is slower than compiling. So that is fine. And this is actually returning false, this line, because the executable was... if the executable is not there, then this returns an error command. And that's not what we want. So how about we just say -f, which will work regardless. And now I can echo this, and it will always be successful. So I suppose that this is what we want to run. So that works for Windows. Now we just have to rinse and repeat. And these are the architectures we want to support. And these are literally the names of the stubs that we want to produce. So here we have this for Windows. Now I will do the same, but I will change. You know what we could do? We could write ourselves a nifty little script to generate this line for us. Yeah. Or I could just copy and paste. I guess I would just copy and paste. So we have 3 and we want 6. Now we have 6. So this first one is done. The second one, I will want to replace every occurrence of these with that. And on this one, I want to replace every occurrence of... And now there will be a bunch of copy and paste. But we also, of course, have to change this. So this Windows now will read like Darwin. And this will be probably Linux. And over here we will want, so this stays as AMD 64, this will change to ARM 64, and so will this. And on this final one, I think we just want ARM. Okay. Now, if we take all these lines and repeat them over here, get rid of these spaces, and prepend npx with the whole thing, we should be able to go to the command line and run this. And it will take its time because the Go cross compiler is not super duper fast. But we'll see if the Go compiler complains about some of the architectures or complains about anything at all. I believe that everything will just run and we will end up with a directory full of stubs. Yeah, I can already see some of these stubs showing up here. We are already compiling for Linux ARM, and here is Linux ARM 64, and there's only one missing. Linux ARM, there you go, everything succeeded. Awesome. So we are able to take these lines, remove the npx from the beginning, and add, oh come on, I got it wrong. Add and end to the end and join everything into a single long beautiful line, like so. And this is how you build this stub. And I guess I'll call this the build stubs action. Now let me confirm that I have everything from here correctly. So these binary names I want to be different. The Go operating systems are correct. And then we have the Go architecture. So let me see. Yeah, everything from the Go build command on out is the same on every architecture and has changed and is just correct. We just tested that. Now let's talk about this. Go architecture, we got that right. We don't need the Go architecture version, the Go ARM version, for the reason I explained. It seems to produce the same binary anyway. And then Go ARM 64. There you go. So I think we got everything we needed from that. Now let's do this again, where we run npm run build stubs, and this time we will be running the same way that you can run at home. And it seems like it was too fast. But it seems to actually be deleting and recreating stuff there, so I don't know why it's fast. Maybe some sort of caching, I don't know, but we are definitely getting rid of the files and then recreating them. So whatever, I'm happy with that. And I'm only going to commit the package.json for now, but we'll keep all these files around. And I think that we will want to change this stub for this final feature I want to sneak into version 2.1, which is our first run message. So I guess I will keep these stubs only in my machine for now. And then when we do this change, then we commit the stubs. We'll see. We'll see. We'll talk about it. But I have the stubs I need, so now I need to, well, let me review the scripts to see if there is something missing, something that I have to change. Well, I guess there is. So I can remove the download dependency. And all these other ones still make sense. Yeah, everything else in here makes sense. Now, let me go to the implementation or the GitHub Actions. I guess I will start with the implementation. So I'll go here into the implementation, and well, I left myself a to-do here because we don't want to just get this stub. We want to go into the stubs folder and we want to concatenate. So I guess what we want to do is just go to the stubs folder and go to stub, and then process platform, and then process architecture. Is there already a variable named stub? No. Okay, so I guess what I can do is call this variable the stub. And I will check if fs exists sync, why not, of stub. So if it does not exist, then I will maybe throw an exception. Yeah, I guess I will throw a new error. Stub not found. And then in here I will give you the stub name. And then I will put a new line and I will say, or not a new line, I'll just say it right here. Maybe your operating system slash architecture. I'll say it like this. Your operating system slash architecture may be unsupported. And I guess this is good enough. And then I don't need these lines. But here's something else we could do. We could allow you, the user, the developer packaging using caxa, we could allow you to provide your own stub if you want. So I could parameterize this, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So let me see where I want to do it, because I have already a bunch of arguments for this function. Let's see in which order they're being used. So output is being used here, but output I think was used before. Filter, dedupe, prepare command, prepare, include node, remove build directory. I guess it is after include node, which is the last part of the preparation of your project, but before remove build project, because remove build project is right at the end. It's the last thing we do. And I don't know why the identifier is appearing after that. So I guess we will want to reorder that. Yeah. So remove build directory will appear right at the end. Where do I have identifier? On the command line right here. So I will move the identifier stuff before the remove build directory. This way, I'm doing this so that the order of the arguments matches the order in which they are used logically, more or less. Let me see if I got everything right. I will search for identifier and I will check that it appears before remove build directory in every situation. Yep, it seems like I got it right. So now I am going to add another argument here which appears after include node, which is the last part of preparing your app for bundling, but before identifier, which is already used as part of the build itself. So here we will add, how about before we do that, we commit. Let me see the things I changed. I reordered this and that. I wrote this bit, which I guess will change in a moment. There you go. Seems good. Now let's add, right after remove or include node, we will have stub, which by default will be this. And then here in the type, we'll say that the stub is optional, but if you provide it, it must be a string. And then over here, we can do that check. I wonder if I should use stat, which is asynchronous, or if I should just use exist sync, or if I should try catch against an error of the stub not being there. I'm just going to use exist sync. It's the simplest thing that can work. And I don't know why exists by itself is deprecated. I am so annoyed by this. Let me take a few moments to figure out if Node.js fs extra exists async. Yeah, there is this path exists, but it may be a directory. Yeah, I guess I would just use path exists, which is asynchronous. Right? Yes. So I can await on that. So if it's not the case of await path exists. All right. So what is the difference again? But with no normal callback signature. Okay. So we added the stub argument to here and to the type, and we are using it over here, and right after no include node and right before identifier, right here, we'll say option, and then this option will be -s, maybe? Is that available? Seems to be. Or stub, and that is advanced, and that is the path to this, or just path to this stub to use. Do I really need to say this? I guess. I would just say path to the stub, and I guess it needs an argument, right? Which is the path. Is that how I'm using this in other places that require a path? I suppose so. Yeah, it's kind of obvious. This documentation is silly, but there you go. And then over here, I will have stub, and then over there, I'll have stub ? Because it's optional, but if it's there, it's a string. And then over here, I'll have stub. Let's check that I added this option correctly. So stub by default is that. Here it's optional. Here I removed that line and I'm using path exists. So if your stub is a directory, it will not fail here, and it will fail there, and it will blow up, but that's a very, very edge case, so I don't care about it. And then over here, stub, stub, stub. Alrighty. So I guess I'm going to start the change log. Added the stub option to specify a custom stub. I'll say advanced option. Then I am simplified the build / distribution of stubs. And here I should specify cross compile the stubs to simplify the GitHub Actions architecture. Put the stubs in version control. Excuse me. Version. Check the stubs in version control to simplify distribution and the workflow of people who want to help in the JavaScript part of caxa and who may not want to set up Go. What else are we doing? Distribute the stubs with the npm package to avoid issues like, and then here I can just start copying and pasting all these tabs that I have open. Yep, I guess that's it. I think there is also a pull request. Where is it? Here it is. And it's related to this issue. So this is the same person who reported the issue, the issue with downloading from GitHub releases in China, and the person sent a pull request. And let's be optimistic and say that we will have added the include advanced option to give an allow list for the files that will be included in your caxa binary. And also we will have this added the initial message advanced option to give message to print a message when uncompressing. Is this a word? And since we have that, I think it would be nice to have the added the progress advanced option to print a progress bar when uncompressing. Is this a word? Alright, so that's everything that I will want to have done. So right now we have done this. And we are not even done. Because I am not 100% sure that this works. And also we need to change the workflow. But let's start with the tests, because we added some options, so we need to test these options. To begin with, do the tests currently pass? I'm running the tests in the background here while I look at the options I have added. So I think that we only changed the order of these two options and added the stub option. And I could test this stub option, but the problem is that I don't know how to test it, because I don't have another stub besides the stub that I have. I could come up with a fake stub just to make sure that it's different from the original stub, and then I could check that passing this command line argument will get me the different stub. No, I'm not testing the stub option. So far the tests are passing. So it seems like I don't have any extra work for me to do. Oh, I could reorder this so that the identifier test comes before. And I guess I will leave a comment here saying the stub option isn't tested because it would require a different fake stub for testing, and maintaining it doesn't seem to be worth the effort. Or I guess I can just test that the thing fails if I pass it a path that does not exist. I guess that's not too hard to do. And it tests that you can specify a different stub on the command line. So let me find somewhere where it says like throw error. Yeah, so this is good. And I copied this from the --force option. So let's see how force is being handled. Is it throwing an exception? I think it is, but I forget. Yes, it is throwing an exception like that. So over here, instead of force, I will say stub. And then over here, I will have just one of these, which will be this one. And I will pass this stub option, and I will pass it a path that doesn't exist. Like so. The tests are still running. And while the tests are still running, I am going to look for if statements, because there are some tests that just literally don't make sense in other platforms, like we can package using .app, and that does not make sense in platforms that are not macOS. But we also have this, which is for native modules, and we have that so that we would not run this test on Linux ARM, which was slow to do, probably on Github Actions. So I can delete this line because we are no longer running that. And then over here we have a bug that we probably want to fix. So I think that this is a bug. I don't think that the exclude option is working correctly in Windows. So I will add here to my changelog, fix the exclude option, advanced option on Windows. In Windows. On Windows? In Windows? I don't know. So I guess this changelog is like a to-do list at this point. So I don't want this to be the case. I want to be able to support exclude on Windows, and I want this test to pass. And I think I have a fair notion of why it's not passing. So let's leave it at that for now. Okay, so the tests that we had before are passing. I will say to run the test for the stub to see if it's passing, because I added it while the tests were running, so it didn't run. All right, so that passed, and we can commit whatever we have. Now let's go to the GitHub Actions. I guess that's where we are going to do most of the work anyway. So building is not necessary because we are going to ship the stubs with the repository. So building can be removed. So we can remove build x64, we can remove build ARM, and we can remove build Linux ARM. And test x64 doesn't really make sense because we are only going to ever test in we are only ever going to test in Intel in GitHub Actions, and we don't need this line. So we are not going to run tests in ARM. I mean, we could. It wouldn't be the end of the world. The code is already here, but if we are not testing on Darwin ARM, we might as well not test in Linux ARM. Then checksums, that entire logic goes away. Release and npm publish stay. So we cut lots of lines. Let's see what we have left. And I suppose that we don't need this anymore. So this platform thing is no longer necessary. So I suppose that we can simplify this matrix because we can say Windows, Mac OS, and Ubuntu. And then we can say that this runs on becomes just the platform. Okay, now I want to check some other project of mine in which I have something that looks like this to see if it resembles what we have here. So let me open another window, another project. How about this project? Maybe not that one. That one probably has a lot of things going on in there. But I can quickly check. Oh, I'm calling it the OS over here. But let me find another project that is conceptually simpler. So maybe my HTML project. Yeah, I'm calling it the OS. So I guess that's what I'm going to do. I call it, so I guess I can remove all of these. And wherever I say platform, I'll just say OS instead. Windows, Mac OS, and Ubuntu, 14, 15, 16. I will do a checkout, a setup node with the node version. I will not need to download any artifacts. I will only need to run npm install ci test. Then, well, I only want to release if I am on a tag, and well, actually I don't need to release because this is to create the GitHub releases. I don't need that. npm publish I do need, however, so let's come here and see if that's what I'm calling it. Yes. So I only want to do that if I am on a tag. I need the test, and it will run on Ubuntu latest. It will check out. It will set up node. It will download artifacts. I don't need that. All I need to say is just npm ci and publish, which is this line here as well. Okay, I will commit this, and now look at this commit. We went from 187 lines to down to 28, and I like that. Now I wonder how different this is from my very simple project. The only difference is that in my simple project, my HTML project, there is a video about it on the channel if you're interested. In this project, I had not updated it to Node 16 yet. And that's the only difference. So we made everything so freaking simple. I love it. What do we have left to do? Well, I guess I'm going to move on to other things and then we'll return to the Windows stuff. So this whole distribution thing, I suppose, will just work because now the Stubs folder will be shipped along with the npm package. So we have that going on for us. And then we close all these issues. This issue we also close. We close that as well. Now let's work with the include option. By the way, I really want to say that this person who is suggesting the include option also helped me write all those lines that I'm deleting. And I'm still grateful for having written those lines and to have streamed the whole process because I learned a lot from it. Also, we learned that the problems that arise from that kind of complexity. And I am always tempted to keep things simple because of this kind of complexity, and I proved that that was the case because all these issues are just side products of that complexity. Things are simpler now. I like it. So let's talk about the include option. So we have the exclude. Let's also implement include. And now how do I, well, let me add this to the type so I don't see an error up there. And I'll look for occurrences of exclude and do I have a capital I thing? No, that is available, so I will say this. Advanced, super advanced, please don't use. Paths to include on the build. The paths are passed to globby and paths that match, and only paths that match will be included. And here I must say may not be used along with, and then here I say include, and there I say exclude. So now I have the include option. Let's continue our search for exclude, and here we'll say include. The issue with include is that if you change your project structure and forget to change the caxa invocation, then your packaged version of the project, well, that doesn't read too nicely. The issue with include is that if you change your project structure and forget to change the cache invocation, then the binary may fail in subtle ways. I guess that's it. Then the binary may fail in subtle ways. Okay. So we have exclude, include, exclude, include, and here we need to pass along include as well. let me check that every occurrence of exclude has a matching include to go with it. So yes, that has include, that has include, that has include, that has include, that has include. Alrighty. So now we need to use this, and we use this in the filter. So if you are first of all, if exclude length is greater than 0, or yeah, greater than 0, and include length is greater than 0, then throw new error of the exclude and include options may not be used at the same time. The exclude and include options may not. How did I write this in the help? May not be used along with exclude. Okay, may not be used together. If exclude length is greater than 0, then that. And if include length is greater than 0, then paths to include like so. Do I want to keep these options? Well, if I'm talking about files to include, oh, that gets complicated. Because I cannot, when I have a directory and I want to exclude the directory, I exclude the directory and I exclude everything in there as well. But now with the include, it's not so easy. Oh, this is getting annoying, but let's investigate how globby works. Guess I would just write a remove tx file in which I will import globby, and I will investigate how that works. And I will say that my include, for instance, is let me see my project. So how about I want to include examples? And I suppose I need to console log this. Now I can in pxts node of source remove. So that includes the folder, but I don't want it to include only the folder. Or maybe I do. Let's see. Let's investigate. So if I say to not expand directories and I don't want to only include files, what do I get? Okay, I get a lot of things, but do I get the examples folder, for instance? Maybe examples is so big that it's not a good example, but let's look at another one that may be simpler. Okay, so maybe the .github directory. So it's only giving me the file. Now it's giving me the directory and the file. And now it's only giving me the directory. So I suppose what we have to do is to have a list containing this, as well as whatever this returns. This is going to get very annoying to implement, and it's mostly going to be incorrect for users anyway. I'm more and more tempted to not have this. By default, it expands directories. So by default, it does this. The problem here is that it's not including the .github itself. And then you cannot just concatenate the include array, because if I have something that is a proper glob, I don't want that to be part of the output, I don't think. Because it's still not going to give me the directory. Yikes. Now I'm looking at if there is any option that will help us out here. Let me see how this is going to be used. It's going to be used as the part of the filter function, which tells us to check if the path is included in the paths to exclude. Okay, let's see the options for fast glob. Yep, that is too complex, not only in terms of implementation, but also in terms of how to reason about it. So we are going to revert what we did. So we have the include and something else. No, just the include. So we are going to revert that. Yeah, it would be too complicated for us to get include exactly right in every case, and we had a conversation here on the issue for this, and in this conversation we came up with a workaround. So I will document the workaround and I will leave it at that. Where is the exclude? Super advanced. Please don't use. If you wish to emulate include, you may use exclude star dot star path to include dot dot dot. The problem in doing that is that the problem with include is that if you change the change your project structure but forget to change the invocation, the caxa invocation, then things will subtly fail only in the packaged version. There you go, it's documented, the workaround is documented, and that will be that. But we need to change the readme because now it is lying. So edit documentation of how to emulate an include option and why that's a bad idea. Why that's probably a bad idea. I mean, it depends on the project, I don't know. Some people seem to want it, so let me see how the language is here. Super advanced, please don't use. If you wish to emulate, you may blah blah blah. The problem with... Yeah, I think it's fair. Yeah. Let me see. So we took care of this 4 tabs. We took care of this tab as well. And now we need to take care of these 3 tabs, which have to do with, or these 2 tabs actually, which have to do with showing a message on initial extraction. This pull request looks super solid to me. Yeah, I really like the way this reads. So we'll probably just go ahead and merge this. I don't know, we'll see. But I think it's time for us to wrap this up, and I guess to save everyone the headache of having 21 megabytes just for today's worth, I will push and this will fail because I don't have the stubs there for the actions to actually succeed. So I'm fine with this failing, and yeah, I will probably just merge this. And there may be one more thing that I did not talk about today that I may want to squeeze into the next release. So how about I just put a to-do here, and that is just a fun one. It may be up here because it's kind of important. Edit way to edit a new stub strategy. Bash. So if you're like, what's that about? Tune in on Wednesday when we are going to continue working on this. We will work on this message, this optional first message. We'll work on this bash thing. We will fix whatever mistakes we end up finding in the whole situation, and then we will release 2.1. And we made a lot more progress than I was expecting to make today, so we may be able to release this on Wednesday. but failing that, we will continue working on this until the end of the week. But tomorrow I will be a guest on IDDQD Sounds channel, and we'll work on packaging repack packages. So we wrote a script together and we will be packaging it together for distribution. So I see you tomorrow over at IDDQD, and I see you on Wednesday to continue work on caxa. Thanks for sticking around. Thank you for supporting me on PayPal and Patreon, and thank you for subscribing to the channel. I hope you learned something. I hope you're having fun. I see you on I see you tomorrow over at IDDQD Sound, and I see you on Wednesday over here. Bye.